Welcome back to the Diocese of Paisley podcast with me, Vanda. Just a reminder that this is episode 2 of a 3-part series. So if you have missed the first part, please go back and listen so you can catch up. And without further ado, here is William Moore's fascinating interview with Timothy Cho.
You were talking about, your education and the indoctrination that you found from the early days to acknowledge the Kims as the provider of everything in your life. What did that look like as a young boy in school? And could you tell us a bit more about, you've mentioned very briefly there about your parents. So your parents, you were in school one day and you came home and you'd learned that your parents had fled and that they had left you. Can you, if you feel up to that, Timothy, share a bit about what a day in the life in school is for someone in North Korea, and what happened then that day you came home when you thought everything was normal. You had a very good upbringing. Your parents were both teachers, and everything must have been as you thought it should be under the current system. But then you come home one day and you discover they're not there. Can you tell us a bit more about how that felt, what that was like?
So in the mid-1990s, millions of people died of starvation in this country because we know the Soviet collapsed in 1990s. And this was in part of, I think my father started to struggle and fight, thinking of himself, what world he was living in, and also why he had to giving that twisted history to his children. So eventually that could not hold him too far, and he made decision to escape to China. But it's a treason in North Korea. He escaped, and this was also not in preparation or informed me, and he had to leave me behind. So when I came home, I was a second year of a primary school student at that time. And when I opened the door, the frozen wind was hitting my face, because this was the place where I had breakfast with my parents, and you could feel it; they were gone. So I fast ran to the train station, and train was gone, and I sat down and cried and cried. Came home, cried all night as well. But then that was it. That's how my father was gone. And it was hard to embrace the reality. So all of a sudden it happened. But then the further reality, I was seeing that there were many children were on the streets from that time. When people started to escape to China because massive starvation happening in North Korea from mid-1990s. At least 3 million people died of starvation. And parents were seeking food, so they crossed the border to China, but it was another country. You don't have a passport. North Koreans born without passport not meant to leave the country. So which my father was also planned, probably. He wanted the family to become reunited after he settled down in China, but it did not happen in that way he planned. And from age 10, then I couldn't go to school, obviously, and not just because starvation was happening, but it also, my father left with me a son of traitors tag. What is it called? Enemy class or hostile class, what North Korea classified itself. Once you in the category of enemy class, you get discriminated against everything. We often use this reference of apartheid systems in North Korea. They actually have created its own that classification systems. So it was hard for me. Not able to go to school.
What did that mean for you then, to be labelled a traitor's child? What impact did that have on you when I think you're a good standing in the community with your family being as so? What did that change night and day? So not only dealing with your parents not being there, but now you had a classification. What did that feel like for a wee boy of, 9, 10?
People were turning away from me, and that day I remember when I went back to school, my teacher, who used to be good friends of my parents, because they were all teachers, she told me, Timothy, your name is no longer on the list. And my friends who I used to play with, they were whispering, oh, his father betrayed the country. So I became all of a sudden the enemy in the society. They were pushing me out. And the only friends that I was able to have were my grandmother and homeless friends, where I lived on the street together, begging food, sleeping on the street. And I had to move from town to town and didn't go back to my hometown for a while because of that taboo of I was pushed out as an enemy in this country. I didn't expect. And also we learned, in North Korea, it was everyone equal, being treated equal, and one of the best societies led by the Kim family. So while I was brainwashed and educated, the reality, it was hitting my face. And slowly, of course, I started having anger against this society, but still didn't think of I was leaving this country maybe too young. But then when I was 17, age 17, I was thinking of my future. Growing up without parents, I needed my independent life, so I decided to join the army. North Korean army is for 10-year service. Every man has to join. And many of my friends who joined came home with malnutrition, actually. They died because they cannot even feed their army properly. But when I went to military office, the officer brought big chunky file like this, full of dust, and he showed me this massive black stamp on top of it. It said, you are the enemy class family. Your father betrayed this country. You cannot join the army. And in tears, I told the military officer, well, I will work hard to pay back my father's crime. Please let me join it. And he said, no. And I was fine, young man. But then, well, what can I do? Where can I go? And the officer told me, we will send it to coal mine. The coal mine is only for enemy class family children's. The mine is not even have any health and safety. You have to crawl into the cave and dig out the coal. Often mines are collapsed. Young men and women and amputated arms were killed. North Korea, you know why it's so dark. They don't have enough electricity power because they need to dig out more coal. They have resources, but the technology is very poor, while they're pouring everything into the weapon investment and into nuclear productions. So that moment I was thinking, whoa, even if I'm married in this country, having my own children, they would be born with the enemy classification tag and would be discriminated from the day they were born. I'm glad my two children are not born in North Korea. They are born in Manchester, British citizens. They don't have that crime tag. So this was my determination to escape to China, but it was a different world and different story.
So a moment must have came then when you had decided that you'd had enough, that you had resolutely decided that you were going to escape. What was as we would say, what was the final straw that broke the camel's back? What happened where you thought, I've had enough, and it's worth the risk, knowing the journey you would have to take to exit?
Yes, it's very dangerous to cross the border to China. We knew that many were being killed during their escape, but I couldn't think anything else than I couldn't live in that country. So I made a decision to cross the border. Met a family, so 4 people, 4 of us, together we crossed the border. It's Tuman River between China and North Korea, 800-kilometer border length. And so we took a path where we didn't have to swim. We walked about half an hour and crossed the border. Now arrived in China. One thing what I thought, I never thought I was going to leave my country. I still miss North Korea, and I still love the people there. It's a beautiful country. One day when the country opened the door, I would definitely encourage you to travel to North Korea, see how beautiful it is. It's not about Kim everything. There are real people like Timothy. There are real people who are so warm, hospitable. So when I arrived in China, and now I was standing and looking at North Korea, I was crying actually, because it was ugly hometown where I was born. But the memory of how I survived, lived with my grandmother, homeless children I left, and also and those people in my village, they're still in my eyes. And now, with 4 people in China, we walked towards the light shining place. From far away distance, light was shining. And we walked there, hours. We walked through the forest. When we reached there, it was the market, Chinese market. Was so light was shining, spin around. It was giant market. And as soon as I arrived there, I was like standing there, because it was different worlds and different life. First time I saw people having, wearing different clothes, hairstyles, young people wearing red, yellow, blue hair colors, and jeans. Some of them having jeans with many holes. I was looking like, wow, this is different world. And delicious food on the market, you could smell it. And that moment I was thinking, goodness, North Korea was the best country in the world led by the Kim family, but this is different reality I saw. And now we have to move on. China is not safe country to live. And then second part, I moved on. I met Christian missionary. He approached. He wanted to help me. I was doubting him. Why he wants to help me? And when I entered his house, the first thing I saw, the Bible was on the table, and the cross was there, small cross, and 3 orphan children in the house. I was definitely thinking that missionary guy was a human kidnapper. He was kidnapping North Korean children. And I also thought the Bible and cross there, it was a curse. Even if I touched that briefly, my finger would have rotten right away. And also children were kidnapped by missionary. And thinking of my brainwashing education back home in North Korea, they said religion is opium of the people. They paraphrased from whom? Many of you recognize that sentence from Karl Marx. And they said, and it is being used by America. America made this religion. And using that religion, try to destroy North Korean society. Therefore, anyone become Christian or having religious materialism, you are a spy. And therefore, Treason Act come to apply you, so you are a political prisoner. That is the reason why Christians, the most persecuted security risk and crime above the crime in North Korea. And from school textbook, cartoons, drama, films, even musical, all the way through, you literally have anti-Christian education materials. They made like a demonic kind of a portrait of stories itself. And that came, I thought the missionary like is him, you know, not him, but he looked something like him. And he's standing there, I couldn't even make eye contact with him. And he offered me food, and I denied to eat the food in case he put sleeping pill inside the food. And I ran away from the house. It was a safe house. It was first God's provision came to me. And the consequence, obviously, running away from God's provision experience I confronted was, and we were 18 of us, and we tried to cross into Mongolian border to arrive in Mongolia. This is how North Koreans usually try to go to South Korea, like how Eastern Germans used to escape, try to go to West Germany. But China, because they do not open the border for North Koreans, that's where you have to cross a number of borders. But we were all arrested, 18 of us, and Chinese police were shooting in our directions when we didn't stop running towards the border. And children in our group, they were screaming. And we stopped, and 2 ladies in our group, It was two sisters, and they took out something and buried in the sand. I didn't. When I asked them later what was that, and they said to me it was the Bible. They couldn't take it with them because we were expecting to go back to North Korea now. So we were in 2 prisons before we sent back to North Korea, and now we arrived in North Korea. It was scary, and all 18 of us, we were, as soon as we arrived, they were tied up our legs, all of us standing on the line to prevent we were to escape. And the first question policeman asked us, has anyone in this group been to church, met any Westerners, Christian missionaries, or prayed in a missionary's house? I did not expect that question because you don't have religious education in North Korea because Kim itself is religion. I'm not sure if any of you recognize this film called The Interview. Have you heard? Yes, some of them nodding. It's a comic film. It's a comic film, American film. They made how to try to assassinate Kim Jong-un. But then this film provoked Kim enormously. He was not happy with this film. So he even hacked into Sony Entertainment. And later on, FBI and CIA involved into this film. But then because of their upset, Kim Jong-un called President Obama was monkey in the jungle. And also, in that film, there's one part, live interview appears. But during the live interviews, this was broadcasted all across North Korean society. But in the middle of the film, Kim was farting. And everyone heard the farting sound. And people were thinking, God can fart? So this was comic film, but how they portrayed it is still in perception inside North Korea. One of the reasons I'm sharing this, because I didn't expect that question would come to me, been to church and prayed, because I didn't know anything about religion, except for the Kims, which you would believe Kim like a God. If they discovered who has been to church and which missionary helped them, they actually send a secret agent to assassinate these missionaries. And there have been a number of missionaries assassinated by North Korean secret agents, and China allowed them to do so on Chinese soil.
So can I ask, you were then imprisoned and then returned back to North Korea. How did that feel, having become so resolute that what you'd endured and you'd made the decision you were going to leave, and now you found yourself back on a bus, back to North Korea?
One thing I knew, I wouldn't be able to survive from there. But one thing what I expected, when I arrived there, seeing those prison cells, that was more than what I expected. And it was not prison camp, it was an investigation center, prison cells, underground. There were about between 20 or 40 prison cells, tiny prison cells, like cut into each cell like that. And each cell had over 50 inmates inside. Everyone looked so depressed in fear. No one wanted to make any eye contact with one another. You don't have names. The first thing they told me, you cannot call your name each other's name. We were given specific numbers. And in my cell, we had about 50 inmates. We didn't have space. Toilet was just here. And we had to sleep leaning on each other's back. So on the first night, I was exhausted after several days on the bus and eventually sent back to North Korea. And so I took a few hours nap, sleeping like this. And then my back was more bending, and I woke up and was going to tell this guy who was leaning against my back. He died while he was leaning against my back. You can imagine someone died, the whole body weight, not pressing it. I was much shorter than this height that time, was like this. was really heavy. He didn't have any feeling. It felt like a stone, massive stone. And he was tortured before we arrived. And we were given just 2 scoops of noodle soup. You just drink like this and finish twice a day. And not medical treatment, obviously. We were no longer human being there. And when we reported to the prison guard, he asked us two people to drag him out of the cell. And his body dragged out of the cell all the way through the corridor. And I trembled. I thought I was going to be killed like him. But the more scary thing is that when you were there, at night time, you can hear it, the sound of screaming and beating and torturing. Any woman who were pregnant in China, those babies are forcibly aborted because they are Chinese babies. But many women, those who become pregnant in China, they're human trafficked. So when a North Korean woman comes to China, they're very vulnerable, arrested by Chinese police, sent back. So Chinese man eager to find a North Korean woman or buy them. They're quite cheap. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 age, each age has a price tag. But these pregnant women screaming, and I can still hear it. Well, it was happening there. And after a few days, I couldn't move. And I denied why I went there. And I just told them I went there for getting a job. But they didn't believe it because the file was there. We were arrested at the Mongolian border. China usually sending along with the file what time you are arrested there. And so North Korean police was very eager to find out who helped you get to Mongolian border. Every time I denied it, beating was coming, torture was coming. Yeah. And I saw a lot of horrific things inside that prison. When I couldn't move, I was just desperate whether I could be killed during the torture or whatever reason I thought I wouldn't be able to survive. So I was already determined to be killed there. But then something, I don't know why they did that. They asked him to go to my grandmother's house. Of course, I couldn't walk by there. And grandmother came there. She wrapped up my body and took him out. But I was the only one released from that prison that moment. And when I went to my grandmother's house, I asked her, can you help me to get out? I have to escape China again, second time. But she said, you cannot walk. And then next day she came and said to me, I found someone who could help you to cross the Tumen River to China. This was a lady who was my nursery friend's mother. And so she crossed the border at midnight with me together. But this time it took us for 2 hours because water level was very deep and I couldn't walk because my body was still leaking around from our body was damaged in prison. I had to wrap up with plastic veneers and was holding the big containers floating on the water. And she was leaning on me and crossing the river. And a couple of times we were drained into, and I was even losing my conscience, and she was keep hitting my head. You have to survive. You have to survive. So we managed to cross the border, and we were exhausted. And knock on someone's door on the border area, Chinese house, and she, instead of the lady who reported the police, and they provided us with shelter, food, telephone that we were able to use. So from there, I was able to move to another city and given about a month treatment, and now taking second journey, have to get out from China. So over the past 25, 30 years, only 34,000 North Koreans managed to get out, 34,000. But if we count the statistics, how many try to escape, it could be hundreds of thousands or even million reached. All of them arrested and sent back to North Korea by Chinese government, killed, executed, tortured, and still many are in the prison camp. And what's happening in those camps? I have this official report called Silence Record produced by Chinese and South Korean government. There's a page 10 here called Hospital 83, Human Experimentation. What do you mean human experimentation? They use prisoners to experiment to produce gas and chemical weapons. We know Hitler did in the Auschwitz camp. Japan did during the Second World War. North Korea used prisoners, and what they produced, those chemical and biological weapons. And we know Russia assassinated their people and are using the chemical weapons. North Korea does exactly the same. And in 2017, you all know that this is a very open story. Kim Jong-un assassinated his half-brother, in Malaysia at the airport, broad daylight. What did he do? Spread on his face, and he died in half an hour. But there are many cases that's not even talked about in the media. And who are the first prisoners of them? Christians. The heart take out, liver take out, all this part of intestines, and they use powder, liquid, all kinds of experiment they do, and they now have tons of those weapons. This is why we are putting sanctions on North Korea, because they put into these weapons into rocket together with the nuclear. And that's what they're aiming to, mass killing of people.
Please join us next time for our final part, where we discover how Timothy finally escaped North Korea by finding hope in the unlikeliest of places and what life is like for him now. And when you have a moment, please remember to like and subscribe to our podcast. See you next time.